The following podcast is taken from a live broadcast on Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Book Club Show on Inspire 105.1 FM. My name is Imrana and it is Tuesday the 15th of October and it's 10 o'clock. I hope you have had a wonderful morning so far. It is wet and a bit grim out there, but it doesn't, it shouldn't stop us from really having a good day. And today we are going to be discussing a really interesting book, actually. It's called Quiet by Susan Cain. I also am joined in the studio by a guest, so we're going to have some really interesting discussion about basically those of you or those of us or whoever there might be out there who are introverts and the power of introverts. So it should be an interesting discussion. But first, we're going to head over to a nasheed by Sami Yusuf, and it is one of my favourites. It's called Pearl, so enjoy.
I spent 1,000 sleepless nights in wait of dreams I could not find. I walked 1,000 empty roads in search of signs to bring me home. With every breath I spoke your name. With every breath I spoke your name. And heard it rolling in the waves. Beneath a veil of ocean blue. I broke illusion from the truth. You said, walk to me and I'll find you. Call me and I'll show you. Like a pearl for you to heal and guide you from deep inside you, hiding like a pearl for you. And from the pulse beneath my skin, you called me to a source within, where every layer revealed one more, a secret brighter than before. And at the heart there lay just one. The root of all that I'd become. I watched the surface start to break. Free of form, free of shame. You said, walk to me and I'll run to you. Call me and I'll show like a pearl for you to heal and guide you from deep inside you, hiding like a pearl for you.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Book Club Show on Inspire 105.1 FM. My name is Imrana. It's Tuesday the 15th of October and it's just past 10 o'clock. That was Pearl by Sami Yusuf. It is one of my favourites because actually in the morning, it kind of is pretty mellow, I guess, and it helps me calm down after I've been rushing around on the school run. So today we are discussing Quiet by Susan Cain. So the little strapline for this book is the power of introverts in a world that can't stop talking. So if there are any introverts or many of you who might identify as one, this is actually, I would highly recommend this book already. For me, it presented, I guess, a bit of a challenge. So I'm just going to read the blurb at the back and also then the introduction, just to give you a bit of a background on the book. So it says, the book that started a quiet revolution. For too long, those who are naturally quiet, serious or sensitive have been overlooked. The loudest have taken over, even if they have nothing to say. It's time for everyone to listen. It's time to harness the power of introverts. It's time for quiet. So that is a pretty intriguing blurb and actually already presents, I guess, an interrogation to maybe those of us who consider ourselves extroverts, and not only that, but actually have always maybe thought we are at the top of the pecking order, if that actually exists. Now, the introduction says that our lives are driven by a fact that most of us can't name and don't understand. It defines who our friends and lovers are, which careers we choose, and whether we blush when we're embarrassed. The fact is whether we're an introvert or an extrovert. The introvert-extrovert divide is the most fundamental dimension of personality, and at least a third of us are on the introverted side. Without introverts, we wouldn't have the Apple computer, the theory of relativity, or Van Gogh's sunflowers. Yet recently, extroverts have taken over. Sensitivity and seriousness are seen as undesirable. In the international bestseller Quiet, Susan Cain shows how the brain chemistry of introverts and extroverts differs and how society undervalues introverts. She gives introverts the tools to take full advantage of their strengths. Passionately argued, superbly researched and filled with real stories, Quiet will permanently change how you see yourself. So I would say when I started reading this book, I was kind of interested to see that, is it the fact that we've maybe got it wrong in the current day and age, that being an introvert is actually also a really kind of, beneficial personality trait to have? Because to be honest, before I read this book, I think I've always assumed that actually if you're introvert, not necessarily that that's like a bad thing, but that maybe that I've always kind of associated with maybe being shy and maybe even having less confidence perhaps. I know when I look at my children, one of my girls, she does tend to, in certain situations, become extremely shy. And then I feel like I've been in situations where I've kind of pushed her to say, no, you should smile and, say hello. But actually then this kind of thing, actually why I found this book really, really interesting, because it actually made me stop and pause and think about actually what is it that I'm maybe trying to change in my child. And then obviously the fact that we as parents especially are shaping the next generation and what that actually means. So if you do have any thoughts today, and maybe you are an introvert and kind of proud to be one, rightly so, you can call in today on 01582 481 822, or you can WhatsApp in on 07779 481 822. So I am joined in the studio by very special guests. So I'm going to introduce Claire Knights, who is a digital marketer and also works for a local arts organisation called Revolution Arts. So hello, Claire.
Hello, Imrana.
How are you feeling this morning?
I'm okay.
Yes.
As a self-confessed introvert and shy introvert, I'd say a little nervous.
Yes.
But I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you for having me.
No, I'm so glad that you have given your time actually to this. And actually you were the one who introduced me to the book, because I can't remember what we might have been talking about, and then you said, I've read this book called Quiet, and I was like, that sounds really interesting. And I think, what do you think? Because I just mentioned this idea of shyness maybe being kind of associated with being introverted. Do you think that's kind of true, or are they two different things?
Well, there is a difference between shyness and introversion, although they do often overlap. So in the book Quiet, Susan Cain defines introversion as people who are essentially extra sensitive to sensory stimulation.
Right.
Whereas shyness is a fear of social disapproval. So I would say I'm both of those things, and people who are introverts are often both of those things.
Right.
The shyness part is probably something you can learn to overcome to some extent, and introversion.
Yeah.
But it's something that's fundamental and always with you, I think, throughout your life. And it's probably why the book appealed to me. It wasn't recommended to me. I was in a bookshop and saw this cover, quiet, and thought, that's me.
Yeah.
And that's why I was drawn to it.
Oh no, and actually, if there are anybody who is watching a Facebook Live, if I just quickly show you actually the cover. So it's all white, and the word quiet, the title of the book is also in white text. So it's almost being camouflage the right term? It's not it's kind of,
it's very low key
almost. So the title quiet is almost submerged in the book cover itself, which actually I think really explains what it means to be maybe an introvert, that you're there and and this idea of being powerful, but maybe not so in your face, right? I mean, that might be a very informal way of saying it. But I really was interested what you just mentioned, that Susan Cain mentions in her book Quiet, about kind of stimulation. So what does that mean? Where an introvert is, what it means there's too much stimulation, and they kind of feel they have to kind of go inside themselves. Is that what it is?
It is essentially, yes. So she talks about how introverts and extroverts both have optimal levels of sensory stimulation. So that's one thing to dispel that as well, that it's not about necessarily interaction with people. And that's another misconception. Introverts get labelled as misanthropes, people who don't like people, whereas one of the things I've heard said is that they're not antisocial, they're differently social. Interaction with people is very draining on your sensory input, because you're doing so many things. There's visual interaction, there's auditory interaction, and someone who's an introvert can just tolerate less of that, or they need less of that to feel right. They still need it in their life, but after maybe an hour or two, they've had enough and they want to go and withdraw into a quiet room somewhere and read a book. So there's something I've definitely experienced, things like conferences where you're meeting a lot of new people in a room, and then at lunchtime you're expected to go and socialise as well. And if you're an introvert, you just want to go and sit in your car and eat your sandwiches. Whereas if you're an extrovert, you're buoyed up by all that social interaction and sensory input, and you want more of it. So you're quite happy to go on socialising at lunchtime. I think it's something for extroverts to understand, because I do recall throughout my life people were saying to me when I've gone quiet, they say to me, like, "Are you all right? Is everything all right?" Because they assume that you're upset or there's something wrong, but it's actually just that you've kind of had enough sensory input, and you need to kind of turn inward for a bit and process it all. So she does mention in the book about how introverts, in some ways, they process their sensory information more deeply than extroverts, so it just takes them a while to kind of sort through things. And
I think it's so important what you said, this idea of actually there's a difference between kind of needing and wanting something, and that in itself, because it's not everyone has those same needs and wants, right? And if any other situation, that would be quite normal. We would consider people having the agency to be able to decide what they want for themselves. But why is it then that when it comes to social settings, though, we're putting an expectation that everybody needs to be able to network and able to socialise in your social space and always be kind of forthcoming with time and all of this? Where does that, do you think, expectation come from then?
It's a tricky thing, and it is something as an expectation that I felt myself, and I think a lot of introverts feel this pressure to be a social animal, and you're made to feel there's something wrong with you if you're not constantly on like that. One of the explanations that's talked about in the book is that it's to do with partly with our transition from kind of rural societies where we lived in very close-knit groups where we all knew each other, and then the advent of industrialisation and urbanisation, where increasingly we're thrown together in big cities with people we don't know. So whereas before people would have known our character And they would have got to know us over a long period of time and would have maybe judged us on our values. In the cities, the pressure is on in a room full of strangers to make an impression as quickly as possible. And that's why this culture of personality, she calls it, a shift from the culture of character to the culture of personality has become such a big thing. I mean, she talks a lot about America, and obviously we follow America's lead to a large extent. So I think that's where it's come from, really, this sort of being crowded together in the city and the need to be vocal and stand out and make an impression and sell yourself, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this idea of, and again, that somehow there's more kind of importance on being able to sell yourself, whether it's, obviously I can imagine that that's how it is at the moment in the professional setting, but it's even become, like you said, even in social settings, that the more kind of a persona you have of being a party animal tends to, at the moment, it's like maybe you're more popular and people kind of like you more, apparently. I don't know. But it's, so what do you think in terms of then this kind of hierarchy at the moment, where if you are an extrovert or you display certain personality traits where you have all of those kind of, whatever it might be, outward, going or whatever, things like that, how does that then impact? I mean, I know Susan Cain, she mentions it, in professional settings in terms of, corporate organisations. So what's happening there then, like in terms of what job roles do the extroverts have compared to introverts then?
Well, interestingly, there is a fairly even balance. There are introvert leaders. There are introverts who get to the top, so it doesn't necessarily exclude you from leadership positions. However, one of the damning things is that they don't get paid as much, unfortunately.
Right. Okay,
so the companies that they lead actually perform better than those who are led by people who are big personalities because of introvert traits, which tend to be about slow, considered reflection. People who are more extroverted tend to be about action. They think less. They're willing to act on impulse and dive in, which can create problems. And she mentions things like the financial crash. And I've been thinking about really what's happening, I suppose, in politics at the moment. It's that kind of escalation of voices shouting louder.
True.
And it's not necessarily then that the most people with the best ideas don't necessarily get to the top. I mean, this is the problem, I think, with valuing extroversion above all other traits. She talks about Harvard Business School and how the students that go there are really trained to be extroverts, socialise all the time, go to parties, and how introversion is really not valued. Whereas if maybe we'd had more quiet, reflective types in the financial sector, things like the financial crash wouldn't have happened. And I think, probably at the moment in politics, we need some more reflective types being listened to. It is difficult, I suppose, when it's our natural tendency to listen to the loudest voices in the room. And she cites various psychological studies that people who are louder are judged by their peers as being more intelligent, having better ideas, even though that's not necessarily the case. And even actually at the start of the book, she's included Susan Cain in her book Quiet, like an informal quiz, which I did try. Did you try it? I did, yes. And how many did you say yes?
So basically, there's a list of how many? Hold on, 20?
20.
Yeah, so there's 20 kind of traits, so to speak. And so I got 7 true.
Really? Yes.
How many did you get?
I'd say I'm probably about 18.
Oh, okay. So we are pretty much, this
is the other thing to say. It's a scale. So no one is 100% introvert and no one's 100% extrovert. And I think there is, she talks about Carl Jung, who was the person who popularised these terms, introvert and extrovert. He said if there was someone who was 100% of those things, they would be insane.
Yeah, basically, either way,
so there are degrees, and some people are ambiverts, so they want equal amounts. But when I did that quiz, I thought, I knew I was a very introspective and introverted person, and I kind of tick a lot of the boxes in terms of being quiet and thoughtful and liking reading.
Yeah, I think it was interesting because I was doing it, and actually, like, just doing the quiz even made me kind of think about certain things that I do. I mean, and we were just, talking, like you said, about politics or the kind of financial crash, and this idea that maybe if these positions are being led by extroverts, and because one of the ones in the quiz is, I tend to think before I speak, which I put false in that one, and then realizing that's not actually a good thing because and actually I'm kind of learning to not do that. So I remember I went to a course. It was on it was on time management, actually.
Oh, how did that go?
And well, yes, thank you. I do get late to places, so anyone who knows me knows that about me. However, I am trying to improve, and but this idea of being not reactionary but being responsive, and actually taking time to pause and think before you try to respond to an email or you respond to or you answer a phone call or whatever it is. And that leads me into another one. I often let calls go through to voicemail. So number 16 in this quiz. And I was like, no, I don't.
You don't?
No, I tend to, the only time I won't answer a call is if I physically can't because I'm somewhere. And, but again, it made me think, but why? Like, what is the need to feel that I need to be doing things like straight away? And if somebody, and actually thinking that can or could potentially be actually detrimental to my kind of daily routine, where if I, as much as I want to be responsive, if I'm being reactionary, and that means that those qualities, if they are associated with being an extrovert, might not necessarily be the best thing. So I
mean, I think that's her point in this book, that one isn't better than the other, but that we can both learn from the other type, and to some extent it is biological. She talks about how people who are introverts, so they did some tests on babies and exposed them to various stimuli, so popping balloons, various like noises, sounds, and brightly coloured mobiles. And the ones that reacted the most, so cried and screamed, they actually grew up to be the introverts, because the part of their brain, which is called the amygdala, which is the kind of flight or fright?
Yes. Fight or flight.
Fight or fright. That part of the brain is more sensitive, essentially, in introverts. So that kind of ties up with the idea of them being more sensitive to stimuli and being more easily overloaded.
Yeah.
So in those babies, they found that was a really good predictor of people then growing up to be introverts. And there is a certain amount that you can do to change your she talks about difference between temperament and personality. So talks about that being extroversion, introversion is a temperament, whereas personality is something that's shaped through your life experiences. So you can do a certain amount to shape your personality, but there is a biological element that's quite fixed, and it takes a lot of effort to pretend to be someone you're not, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's it is one of those things, I guess, even this idea that there might be actually some people who do then feel that they need to be able to display certain qualities of being an extrovert, even though they might not themselves be like that. And again, it's coming back to this idea that if that's what's kind of valued at the moment or seen as being better, then there might be this pressure on people to act. And do you think it's easy to do that, though? Do you think somebody who is an introvert can actually display certain characteristics, or do you think it would be actually quite difficult?
I think they can display it. I mean, it probably depends whether you've got the other attributes of shyness and things like that, so you have more to overcome. Yeah. Because some people who come across very well socially for a short period of time, people will say to them, "Oh, I can't believe you're an introvert." Right. And they are able to act. But just not for very long. So it's hard to keep up the pretense for a long time. And I think it's something that I definitely experienced, especially moving from education into the world of work. So in the world of education, I was very much in my element. Right. Even though Susan Cain in her book talks about how education is set up for a lot of group work, and I didn't like the subjects like drama or group discussions. And I think I have said to you, one of my first school reports says something about I wish Claire would contribute more to discussions because she has a lot to offer. Right. But I love the reading and the study, and it's quite individual, really, academia, because it's your grades at the end of the day. And then coming out into the world of work, and it it being very open plan offices is one of the things she talks about as being something that introverts suffer with. And it's probably why I've designed my work life finally the way I have. But I did experience a lot of dissatisfaction. I didn't really know why. And I thought it's because there's something lacking in my I can't live up to this ideal of what corporate life is like.
And I think it's and it's that kind of, I think, almost like a duality in terms of how we are then at work and then maybe at home and then maybe with friends, and maybe we do all have different personas, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But the conversation so far has been really interesting. We are discussing today Quiet by Susan Cain. We will be heading over to the break in a short while, so grab yourselves a cup of tea and maybe have a think about certain qualities and traits that you have, and feel free to call in a few moments. Okay, assalamu alaikum.
You're listening to an Inspire FM podcast, making available our popular programs from our daily broadcast on Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Book Club Show on Inspire 105.1 FM. Today is Tuesday the 15th of October. It is 10:30 and I'm your host Imrana. I hope you had a lovely break in between and managed to grab yourselves a cup of tea or coffee. We are today talking about the book Quiet by Susan Cain, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. So just before the break we were talking a little bit about the fact that to be extroversion and introversion is actually a spectrum. So you can't just be, there's nobody that is completely an extrovert or 100% introvert, but we are or display different, kind of traits. We mentioned that in the book itself, there is this kind of informal quiz, which gives you an idea of actually, or helps you, I guess, decide where on the scale that you are. And I was just mentioning that, I had 7 kind of true answers out of the 20 that were there, which basically means I'm more actually on the extrovert side, which is interesting because actually there are parts of me that... like number 2 in this quiz is I often prefer to express myself in writing, and that is definitely true. It's something that I enjoy writing, especially poetry. I kind of feel that when I'm feeling a certain way, I'd rather express myself in that way. But then, interestingly enough, I also find that poetry that I've written, when I then get up and actually share that poetry in front of other people, it really gives me a different dimension to how I'm feeling, and I actually also enjoy that. And there was actually an interview by Susan Cain that she gave, and she mentioned in that about this idea of public speaking. Now, she herself trained to be a corporate lawyer, and she then left that profession because she was told by someone that she basically wouldn't be able to make it, and that was based on the fact that the assumptions that they'd made about her in terms of, I guess, her personality. But then she went on to work on this book, and she does say that she started working on it since 2005, and it took her I think nearly I can't remember 5 years or maybe a bit longer to actually write the book. But she then explains that she did a TED talk, and how even this idea that even though she was an introvert or is an introvert, how she then came about to actually give a TED talk, which the fact that you've got this massive platform and you're talking in front kind of a huge audience and listeners, that she actually attended like a course to kind of overcome that initial fear, and then this idea that actually there are certain, I guess, qualities that you can build in yourself, and the assumption that just because somebody is holding a space, for example, on stage, doesn't necessarily mean that they're an extrovert. So you can still be an introvert and hold your space, have that confidence, and be able to share what you want. And she also then refers back to this idea that it needs to be something herself, it needs to be something meaningful, because if she's delivering something meaningful, she can always come back to that. So even if there's even a slight element of feeling shy or feeling overwhelmed even to be in a certain space, that is something that she will always come back to. And that kind of actually does make me think about, even being on the radio. I mean, I've been doing this show, I think, just over maybe a year. And I remember initially being asked that if I'd be interested, and my initial response was kind of like, oh, no, I don't think I could do that, because this idea that, I will have to talk for an hour, even though I've been told I can talk for the whole of England, which is obviously, I think, a bit insulting sometimes. It was interesting. And actually, what kind of maybe personality traits would you need to be even a radio presenter? And I have my special guest in the studio, who is Claire Knight. So Claire is a digital marketer and also working for Revolution Arts. I have the pleasure of actually working with her because I also work for Revolution, which is really kind of cool and amazing role to have in Luton. So I'm just going to ask Claire we as Revolution are having an event, aren't we, to do with radio? So could you maybe share with our listeners what that is? And maybe even before that, what is your opinion about, because you're on the radio and you're an introvert, so how are you feeling, and what could attending the event that we've got organised help?
Help introverts or help everyone? Help everyone.
Know. I guess help introverts specifically, but then generally as well.
I'm not sure about introverts.
Okay.
How am I feeling? Well, I was a little nervous to start off with. Feeling better now.
Good.
I think radio is probably a medium that's quite suited to introverts because you feel like you're just in a room with one other person, but even though you're speaking to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's another thing to say about introverts. They tend to prefer one-on-one or small group interactions to standing up in front of a big audience. So again, it's not that they're antisocial, it's just that they prefer to socialise in different ways.
Exactly.
Regarding Revolution Arts, they are running we are running an event called Roots to Radio Career, spit it out, Creative Cafe. It's on Thursday, 24th of October at 6 p.m. And it's an event, if you're interested in working in radio, it's an event you should go to because we've got two expert guest speakers there, one of whom works at this very station, Shamiza Rashid, and also Terry Lee from the University of Bedfordshire, who's from their media teaching department, and he's responsible for the university's award-winning Radio Lab 97.1 FM radio station. So they will both be there giving their tips and advice on how you can get into a career in radio, if that's something you're interested in. There'll be other like-minded people there who are interested in radio who you can talk to afterwards. Refreshments provided, which is always a good incentive.
And where is it? Sorry?
It's at the University of Bedfordshire Park Square campus. So that's Thursday, the 24th of October, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And if you're interested, you can go to the Revolution Arts website. It's on our homepage. So that's revolutionarts.com. Luton, not Lucian.
Yes, please. Because we do get people making that mistake, which I understand. But no, it's a really cool name that we have. So it's Revolution. So that's good. Yeah. And actually, I'm just kind of thinking maybe if I was kind of younger and wanting to think about, that could be a really good kind of stepping stone, I guess, just being able to come and be in an environment where you can hear from, I guess, kind of experts in the field and just being able to get introduced that way, as opposed to maybe, because it is one of those things. I think, if I remember actually telling my university friends who I'm still in touch with that, I present a show on the community radio station. They were like, what? Like you do that? And it was really interesting because I thought, I don't know whether, everyone changes over time, but whether, even when I shared like my spoken word film I'd done, and they were again really surprised, and I just thought, I wonder whether I was, maybe different in a way at university or when I was younger, and maybe have I been able to grow in, I don't know what it might be. I don't know if it's confidence necessarily, but I almost think that maybe with age, you tend to, coming back to what I think we were saying in the break, when you really care about something and maybe you see the world around you and you want to be able to make some positive change. Do you think that helps us be a bit more committed to certain things, and then when we are put in positions of having to speak to other people or in front of other people, do you think that helps? Even
caring about,
and then being able to share that passion, I guess, with others, even though you might be shy or you might be, not wanting to speak in front of like a huge audience, but do you think that can actually change if something matters?
I think it definitely helps, and it's something that is definitely, if you have a personal quality that holds you back from social interaction, it helps if you're something you care about. It will help you to overcome that your reserved nature, and ultimately we do want to share our ideas with other people and have an impact on the world. I think that's the thing about introverted people. And Susan Cain is definitely, in her book, she's not saying everyone should be quiet and sit in a corner and not speak to anyone, but she's just saying that there is a value in withdrawing and reflecting. And there's also a value then on, once you've done that reflection, going out into the world and sharing those ideas with other people, however you choose to do that. It might be on radio, it might be through writing, it might be standing up in front of a room of people. But it's just that the reflective side seems to be less valued in our society at the moment.
Yeah. And then, what you mentioned earlier about even school, kind of the school system and education. So one of the chapters in the book Quiet by Susan Cain is called When Collaboration Kills Creativity. Now, both of us, I guess, working in the arts at the moment, I think that's a really interesting, I guess, kind of topic to talk about. So at one point in the book she says about about this idea of collaboration killing creativity, that if solitude is an important key to creativity, then we might all want to develop a taste for it. We'd want to teach our kids to work independently. We'd want to give employees plenty of privacy and autonomy, yet increasingly we do just the opposite. So how do you think then we are going to overcome this? Because we know how important it is actually to be everyone's creative, but being able to have an outlet and platform to do that. But then, like you said, and she mentions in the book, this idea that offices are now becoming kind of open offices where everyone's literally in the same room and you just don't have your own space. Or even the same, I guess, with schools, the fact that how often are children given time actually to be kind of just with themselves, or because there's a constant like group work and do this now, and so how can we change that system, because that system is now pretty big? What
it's difficult. I think part of it, unfortunately, is financial, and that it's just cheaper to have big open expanses of space and plonk people in. But I think it's really about being more creative and having more understanding of how to get the most, because this is the thing. Everyone misses out, essentially. Everyone loses out from treating everyone the same. So if we designed our offices and our schools more intelligently and had little, and the day as well, little breakout spaces, corners that people can go and sit in and be alone with their thoughts. And then when they're ready to come out and she talks about the importance of these kind of low-key social interactions. So when she talks about Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple Computers, and talks about him working at Hewlett-Packard on his own in his cubicle. She's saying he did have social interactions, but they're very low-key ones. So they had a donut trolley that came round twice a day. And again, they're the kind of social interactions that I enjoy, not the big formal meetings or the formal structured group work, but the things where you just bump into. And again, cafeterias and things like that are the things that are being taken away from workplaces. And they're the places that will allow people to bump into each other in more relaxed settings and allow people to exchange ideas. So I think it's really about being more creative, because we always talk about valuing creativity, especially in this country, as it being one of our biggest exports. But I don't think that's necessarily reflected or respected in the design of our schools and offices and the day itself. I mean, I did used to sometimes go and book a meeting room for myself and sit in there when I wanted to think deeply, because it's well known that one of the biggest obstacles to having deep thoughts, thinking deeply about a complex problem, which is what a lot of us do now, a lot of us are knowledge workers, is being interrupted. And when you're in an open plan office, there are so many interruptions. And people say to me now, so when I get a delivery at home, because I work from home a lot now, which I like because I can concentrate, the delivery drivers will say to me, don't you do you get much done? Aren't you always watching daytime TV? I said, do you know how much time gets wasted in an open plan office because people wander over, just start a conversation with you because you're there. The phone rings, then an email pops up. And when I'm at home, I can manage all those things. I don't get interrupted apart from by my cat. Yes, and delivery drivers. It's an endless quest for me trying to find this perfect working environment. I don't know. I have to go and rent a flat somewhere where no one knows where I live or something like that. Even in cafes, So Susan Kane talked about she likes going to work in cafes, and I like it as well because you're kind of anonymous. Yes, so there's this lovely social buzz in the background. It's kind of a low level noise that allows you to concentrate. But if you go to the same one often enough, you get known, and then people come and talk to you. But I think if we do really value deep thinking and creative problem solving, we need to create the environments that will allow people to do that, and respect that some people do need to go off and be in a cubicle and be quiet and think about it and then come out and share it with the group. And there was an interesting thing actually in this book about brainstorming and about how group brainstorming doesn't work. Right. And well, there are various reasons for it. One of them is apparently social loafing. Where some individuals tend to sit back and let others do the work. Second, production blocking, only one person can talk at a time. And the third one, which is probably most relevant to people who are introverted, is social apprehension, so fear of being judged for your ideas. So if you're interested in generating a lot of creative ideas, the most effective way to do it is to get people to go off on their own, come up with the ideas, and then come back as a group and share them, keep them around together.
That's really actually interesting, and now suddenly makes perfect sense. But I mean, I completely, and it's actually coming back to this idea of deep thinking and being reflective. I guess, even somebody of like the Muslim faith, I mean, we know that even like Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam also took time to be in isolation, and that he'd climb a mountain and he'd literally just spend time there. And actually, a lot of the prophets would do that. And I think it's so important. And I guess not even just, the work environment. I mean, at any time, just daily taking a bit of time out just from everything and switching off, because that's the other thing, isn't it? Because now in a digital age, and somebody who is now a digital marketer, I mean, how do you then do that? So somebody's maybe having to almost be switched on online, or at certain parts, a part of your kind of profession. How do you then switch off from all that kind of digital cyberspace and things?
I think I've learned to manage it. I've learned, yes, rather than it manage me. So I'm quite strict so I turn off notifications on my phone. I've moved all social media apps to the second screen. I don't get any notifications that flash up on my screen. But it is the hardest part for me, the social media part, because even that kind of interaction, it expects you to be very responsive very quickly, which doesn't come naturally to me, because I do like to think about things in a more considered way. So personally, I prefer the web design and development side of digital marketing, because it's the slower, more thoughtful side of it. But yes, it's really just I turn off email notifications and only check my email client 3 or 4 times a day when I choose to, rather than have. But this is the thing, a lot of these things are set up by default to have these notifications pop up at you all the time. Which really just you just can't concentrate, because you're just permanently in a state of distraction, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, that's the perfect way to describe it, isn't it? This idea of always feeling distracted or being distracted, getting distracted, which, sums me up to a T, unfortunately. And so it is, I guess, this idea that, Susan Kane in her book Quiet, so then this strapline, the power of introverts in a world that can't stop talking. I mean, is that true? Are we really in a day and age where people just want to talk? Like, do you feel that?
I do really. Yeah. Maybe that's my take on it as an introvert. Introvert. Yeah. and sadly, even in this book, I mean, it was published in, I think, 2012, and she talks about how the internet is perhaps a place where more introverted people can have more of a voice. But I do feel increasingly, especially in recent times, that it's become more of a shouting factory where the extroverts, who are extroverts in real life, are also extroverts on social media. People like Donald Trump, who've got the quick soundbite that shout the loudest, are the ones that are they're getting all the attention. I mean,
yeah, it's true.
It's unfortunately the way we work. We do give more attention to people who shout the loudest. Yeah. It's about having that knowledge to see what's happening and to step back and say, okay, there are some quieter people who maybe have some better ideas.
Yeah. I mean, I asked a couple of people before the show what they felt in terms of what an introvert, extrovert means to them. So somebody who I've worked with on actually my last project, which was Echoes, who I did ask Jitty, who's an events manager, what she felt was definition for introvert and extrovert. So introvert, so don't underestimate the introvert, internally analysing with a quiet self-respect without feeling the need for affirmation to confirm. So a steady, calm influence, not to be overlooked. So, and that links nicely to what you've said. So she's put, you don't have to shout the loudest to have an impact. For extrovert, she's put, don't underestimate the extrovert. Externally vocal with a questionable confidence, ? The need for open affirmation with a strong feeling of externalizing the direction of the mind outside oneself. And then she's ended that with shouting the loudest just means you have projection. I actually thought that almost felt like a bit of an attack on an extrovert actually, but I think it's really beautifully kind of summed up. And then there was I also sent a message to the Aramna Book Club, which I run, and I was asking for opinions there, and I had lovely Rosina, and she messaged saying, yes, I would identify as being an introvert in some ways, but love chatting. I would define introvert inward looking, perhaps someone who enjoys their own company, maybe prefers to have time by themselves, etc. And extrovert, more outward looking, likes to be around others. And then also they can be seen personality traits, tendencies that can change over time and affected by the environment, nurture and genetics, hereditary tendencies, etc. So which just kind of sums up some of the things, I guess, that we've been saying. And I mean, what I might do is maybe I should send the group that quiz to do and really find out where everyone is on the on the scale. So I mean, I guess we've got a little bit of the show left. I mean, what do you think we need to do to challenge then the misconceptions about introverts in introversion?
Well, one of the things I say, maybe if you think you're an extrovert, read this book because you're probably. She says we said at the beginning, is a third to half of people, all people are extroverts. So you're probably living with one, or you work with one. Yeah, and it just helps to understand someone else's mindset. So rather and when in the chapter about relationships, she talks about how that can be a really difficult thing in terms of romantic relationships and friendships as well. That when someone goes quiet, an extrovert can think, you're withdrawing from me, because extroverts express themselves very differently. And if they're having a disagreement, they want their partner to be getting passionate and vocal. And because introverts don't like conflict, they tend to withdraw and go quiet. Or if their partner is saying to them, I don't want to have as many I don't want to have a dinner party every week like you do. They think there's a serious problem. But actually, if you can understand where that's coming from, it helps you negotiate those things differently. So it's really about, I suppose, understanding that it isn't a personality defect. It's just a different way of being, a fundamentally different way of being that lots of people experience.
Exactly.
And that you can then, with that understanding, you can then negotiate any different differences between you in a more intelligent way, I suppose.
No, definitely. I would agree with that. I would, because having, I guess done the show and with the book, definitely recommend it. And especially that's the thing. I think initially I thought, I bet, reading this book will probably really help, in terms of the work environment. But actually it really is across the board. So like you said, whether it's with your partner or if you're a parent or a carer, actually how you then deal with the other people in your life, I guess. And the fact that, I mean, some of you might have seen on social media. So Ustad, Osama Khan, may Allah bless him with health and kind of a swift recovery and just ease in his difficult time. But the fact that even when he was diagnosed with his illness, and one of the first things he thought about is, how do I fix things with others? And he says, if you are going to differ with love. And I think we sometimes tend to forget that just because somebody's different doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be rubbing each other the wrong way. Like, you can actually be complementary to each other. So even if, for example, you are an extrovert who is married to an introvert, which I think I might fall in that category, I think it's something that can really help just to navigate that. And again, I guess as a parent, how I kind of deal with my children, if one is being shy or maybe not as forthcoming, actually respecting that. And it's not even just about thinking, like you said, it's a defect, but actually this is another human being, and I need to respect the way that person is, and likewise obviously I guess expect that back. So then how can we, I guess in the last couple of minutes, is there a particular advice? Okay, so obviously about reading the book, but anyone who's maybe listening in who's an introvert and now needs to, I don't know, they're starting on a new journey of something, I mean, what do you think is one of the first things or a piece of advice that you could share?
Well, for me, reading the book really helped because, as I said, because extroversion is held up as a cultural ideal. I certainly went through a lot of my life feeling, I'm shy and withdrawn. That's some kind of defect, and that can make you feel worse about yourself. So to understand that that's a natural way to be is one thing, and makes you feel better about yourself, but also to understand the strengths, really. So there's an overlap with people who are highly sensitive. And just to read a quote from the book, she said, the highly sensitive tend to be philosophical or spiritual in their orientation rather than materialistic or hedonistic. They dream vividly. They love music, nature, art, physical beauty. So I think introversion has all those positive characteristics. And one quote, which is at the front, which I wanted to read, it says, as the science journalist Winifred Gallagher writes, the glory of the disposition that stops to consider stimuli rather than rushing in to engage with them is its long association with intellectual and artistic achievement. Neither MC Squared nor Paradise Lost was dashed off by a party animal.
That's a really good one to end on, actually. And I think it's it's just really important. I think that it's extrovert, introvert, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that we're kind of I guess just respecting each other and just knowing that we can be powerful in whatever we do. Have a good week. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. Why not tune in to our live stream at inspirefm.org and follow and subscribe to our social media platforms at InspireFM Luton.